Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Host Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Mandatory vaccination and constitutional rights, as recently discussed in Trinidad and Tobago. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 30th August 2021. Details after this important message.
Hubbard's big promotion is back. Live free for 1 year. Spend $50 or more in any Hubbard's department and receive a chance to win big prizes every month. Property or vehicle insurance for 1 year. Free internet, cable and data for 1 year. Free fuel for 1 year. Free cooking gas for 1 year. Free electricity for 1 year. Free drinks for 1 year. Extra cash account and the big free groceries for 1 year. Promotion runs from April 1st to September 30th, 2021. Live free for 1 year with Hubbard's in association with Solgas, Flow, Grenadian General Insurance, Carib Brewery, Coca-Cola, Grenada Bottling Company, Grenlec, Communal Cooperative Credit Union, Dutch Lady Milk, Promo, Danny and Supreme. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back. Your rights are enshrined in the Constitution. But when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic and mandatory vaccination, those rights may become second place in light of the consideration of several factors, including safety and well-being of an entire nation. TV6's Alicia Boucher has the details from a webinar hosted by the University of Trinidad and Tobago to discuss the issue.
Mandatory vaccination policies have been approached differently in international territories. They include imposing fines for not taking the vaccine, barring the unvaccinated from entering certain public spaces, and making it a requirement for persons in certain sectors, such as health and federal workers. Immediate past president of the Law Association, Senior Counsel Douglas Mendez, says this country already has laws which allow for mandatory vaccination where entry into primary and preschools is concerned.
The Act currently applies to poliomyelitis, diphtheria, tetanus, yellow fever, and measles, but the minister is empowered to include additional communicable diseases. One would assume that he would not do so unless satisfied that a vaccine which is safe for children of nursery and primary school age is readily available.
But outside of that, new legislation would be needed for mandatory vaccination of adults, subject to an individual's rights under the Constitution. While a person has a right to body and to refuse medical treatment, Mendez says those rights are not absolute and do come with limitations.
The exercise of the right not to take a vaccine may impinge upon another person's right not to be exposed to a contagious disease.
Further to that is the economic hardship as a result of lockdowns, increased mental health issues from a lack of socialization, and education, which is being jeopardized on various levels, among other negative effects.
It also seems plain that mandatory vaccination legislation will strike a fair balance between the rights of the individual and the interests of the community. The physical integrity of the reluctant unvaccinated is invaded only to a limited extent, with great benefits to their own health and minimal risk of any adverse outcome.
The senior counsel says exceptions to mandatory vaccine laws are made for people who have contraindications to the vaccines.
Mandatory vaccine laws do not violate constitutional rights, provided, of course, that the science indicates that the vaccine is relatively safe and will have the effect of protecting the population from contracting the disease and will stop the spread of the disease.
Can that be done on a simple majority, or does it have to require a 3/5 majority? Because I noted that you would have made mention to certain rights enshrined in the Constitution and so on.
Well, if the view that I expressed is correct, which is consistent with the abundant case law that I mentioned, which is that mandatory vaccination laws do not infringe constitutional rights, then it will not need a special majority. But I would be quite surprised if the government goes into parliament and cannot get the support of the opposition and the independent senators, because it's in everyone's interest to resolve this issue as soon as possible.
According to Attorney at Law Cohen Garcia, there is also case law which suggests that mandatory vaccination can be done across the employment sector. But would there be avenues for legal redress should a person suffer a serious adverse reaction after being mandated to take a vaccine?
Who is liable? Is it the employee or is it the employer? And I mean, those are competing concerns that I suppose need to be considered and balanced in legislation. Yes, there needs to be a legislative framework, and whether the legislative framework should or should not deal with the question of consequences in the event of somebody suffering some kind of severe adverse reaction is a matter that ought to be determined, I think, by those who will be elected to represent us, the Parliament.
Alicia Boucher, TV6 News.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister is expressing concern about those in his country who are unvaccinated and are at risk of contracting the Delta variant if any case is not detected by the strict protocols, which have so far identified the strain in 5 returning nationals. Joel Brown of TV6 News reports.
We do everything to put a screen between us and it. So far the screen is working, but we cannot guarantee. And I am concerned, I am worried that the Delta virus could enter Trinidad and Tobago and meet a largely unvaccinated population.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley speaking during the commissioning of the new Malabar Government Primary School on Thursday. On Wednesday night, the Health Ministry confirmed 2 additional cases of the Delta variant and announced Trinidad and Tobago has confirmed 5 cases of the COVID-19 Delta variant to date. The ministry has said all 5 patients were nationals who returned from abroad who provided negative PCR tests, which were taken 72 hours prior to arrival, but tested positive for the Delta variant while they were in state quarantine after their arrival.
The Delta variant is more vigorous than the original. It is killing more people. It is more infectious, and it is causing havoc outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
Unvaccinated nationals can enter Trinidad and Tobago once approved by the travel pass system, but must pay for their quarantine.
The policy we're following right now allows people who are vaccinated to come right in and go right home. There's a risk there. There's a risk there. Because nobody has said that if you are vaccinated, you cannot be infected by the Delta virus. That has not been said. That is not so. It says that it gives you the best chance, and we're using it to be able to do the things that we otherwise would not be done. And of course, we can't quarantine every person who comes into the country. The logistics of that is too difficult.
The travel pass system mandates that all travelers, including minors, must submit a negative nasal swab PCR test result taken no earlier than 72 hours prior to arrival in Trinidad and Tobago.
So we are allowing people who are vaccinated to come in. But what if, in that policy, a person who has a PCR test negative on Thursday, but develops the clinical symptoms to be positive 3 days later? Because the virus has an incubation period.
The Prime Minister expressed his concern if there are Delta variant cases who are not nationals returning from abroad and placed in quarantine.
There's nothing that we are doing in all the things that we are doing that we can say confidently and sensibly that we are immune to that virus, that variant.
The Prime Minister said while about 10% of the population may have medical reasons why they cannot get vaccinated, he continued to express hope that the vast majority of the population will make use of the WHO COVID vaccines that are available.
The next time I make a speech, it's going to be a speech of all the reasons that I'm aware of why people in this population are making personal decisions not to use the vaccines to protect themselves from a deadly virus. I think that's going to be a bestseller. So I'm claiming authorship today and copyright.
Joel Brown, TV6 News.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Members of the Nurses Association of Jamaica were back on the job on Friday, making it clear that it would be putting pressure on the government if their needs are not met. More in this TVJ News item.
On Wednesday, a number of nurses called in sick, even as hospitals across the island continue to burst at the seams dealing with COVID-19 cases.
Nurses are frustrated. Nurses feel unappreciated, unrecognized. There are no areas in the hospitals for nurses to rest. There is nowhere for them to take a break. The attention that nurses feel that they should be getting, they are not getting it. And on top of that, the utterances that were made by the Prime Minister really angered the nurses.
But speaking on Primetime News Wednesday, Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton said he and his team from the Ministry of Health met with the nurses to talk about the issues affecting them.
I reassured them that there needed to be clarity because the Prime Minister really in his statement did not mention nurses or doctors. I've listened back to the tape. I was there. He spoke to a process of triaging for attention of persons who need help in the healthcare system and the doctor on duty making the call. The truth is that the Prime Minister and by extension the government is very sympathetic to the conditions and the challenges of our nurses and doctors.
President of the Nurses Association of Jamaica, Patsy Edwards Henry, says since that meeting, another one was called with her members, and they have agreed to return to work until the issues are ironed out.
The president of the Caribbean Development Bank is optimistic that the region will successfully navigate the COVID-19 threat. Dr. Hygienius Leon spoke briefly with the local media on Thursday on the St. Lucia leg of courtesy calls to member states. Miguel Fevrier of MBC Prime News reports.
I think there is ample room for us to be optimistic that despite the conjuncture of events that we now face in terms of the impact of COVID, the future of climate change, the development of our region getting past structural challenges that we have faced in the past, we can go forward and we can do better. And I think that's the single most point that I have been trying to convey.
Dr. Hygienius Jean Leo is the president of the Caribbean Development Bank. The St. Lucian National led the 5-member CDP contingent at a press conference at the office of the Prime Minister as part of the St. Lucia leg of courtesy calls to borrowing member states within the region. COVID-19 has negatively impacted the economies of the region, and overcoming the setbacks will not be easy, the CDP president says.
But I think with commitment, with discipline, with persistence, the region as a whole, St. Lucia in particular, can get past the trough that we are in if we can set our sights to aspirational goals that, in my mind, should not be limited either by physical size, by smallness of population, or by lack or absence of natural resources, provided we can raise our game by tapping into the unbounded imagination of our people.
Dr. Leo says there are better times ahead for St. Lucia and the region, but only with understanding what needs to be done and pushing ourselves to get it done. But it is complex, he observes. The bank cannot navigate the impact of COVID, but can help influence how countries react to it.
I think it is a general line across all the international financial institutions that COVID has been seen as having a rescue component and a recovery component. Unfortunately, we have not seen the back of COVID, so the recovery part is more or less still in flux and transitioning. But from the rescue part, The focus has been across the world, first on saving livelihoods, strengthening education systems, and providing continuity for businesses to allow them to stay afloat. Our advice to all of our borrowing member countries has been in that same vein. We are not reinventing this.
On the support side, Dr. Leo says the Caribbean Development Bank, like other international lending agencies, has provided relief to governments who had loans with the CDB in the form of a stoppage or non-payment of principal and interest to allow governments with a little space to be able to refocus some of the money they would have paid back towards social protection for their people. Miguel Fabry, NBC Prime.
Did you know that your friends and family can now shop at the Food Fair from anywhere in the world, and you can receive here in Grenada? The Food Fair and GrenadaMarket.com now makes it possible through secure online shopping and personalized customer service. Simply send your loved ones a list of your preferred items or let them fill an online basket, and the items will be available for pickup or delivery. Visit GrenadaMarket.com or thefoodfair.gd today for more details. The new norm. Spread the news.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.